All right, hello. I'll be going over the 2024 region test. This test is a pretty major step up from district in terms of difficulty, requiring a lot of questions that both take a while and require unique methods to solve. Let's begin. Okay, the rental fee from cars includes a charge for each day and charge for each mile. Tom rented a car for 4 days, drove 170 miles, and spent $177.56. Diane rented for 6 days, 208 miles, and paid $250.24. Find the charge for each mile driven. Well, this is a systems of equation. 4 times the cost per day plus 177 times the cost per mile gets you the amount they spent. Do that for both of them. Then do the RF at the matrix, which basically solves it. So matrix, math, scroll up till you get to RF, and then plug in the matrix. And you'll get a value of 0.28. Number two, given the points or A, B, all this stuff, if AB is perpendicular to CD and A is -10, then what is B? So A, for it to be perpendicular, you have to figure out what the perpendicular slope is. So AB goes up 6 and to the right 10. So its slope is 10 or 6 over 10 or 3 over 5. Find the perpendicular slope, you take the inverse of that, 5 over 3, and then make it negative. So -5 over 3. Then -5 over 3 is your slope. Now you can choose the point at C and write it in point slope form, and then solve for the line when x is equal to -10. So -5 over 3, x minus 2 minus 4 is how you write it in point slope form, essentially. And if you do that, you'll get a value of 16 as b if you plug in -10. Find the perimeter of triangle ABC. We can use our shoelace program for this. Put all the x values of ABC in L1 and y values in L2. So -4, 6, and 2, 2, 8, and -4. And if you use our shoelace program, you'll get a perimeter of 32.8. If AB is parallel to CE, then what is C? Well, now that it's parallel, that means it has the same slope. As we talked about before, the slope is 3 over 5. So 3 over 5 and then point slope form. So 3 over 5 x minus 2 minus 4. Well, and if you plug in 5 as your x, you'll get a C value of -2.2. 5. If F is the midpoint of AB and G is the midpoint of BC, then FG is what? Okay, well, you need to figure out the midpoints of these 2 points. So midpoint of AB is the average of the x and the average of the y. So 1, 5. And then the same thing for BC. So 4, 2. Then you use Pythagorean theorem based on that. And so the change in x is 3. The change in y is also 3. So square root of 3 squared plus 3 squared is 4.2. Because it goes from x equals 1 to x equals 4 and y equals 5 to y equals 2. Anthony left Seminole on his bike. It headed west at 24 miles per hour. After 90 minutes, he headed north at that speed for 2 hours, headed east 40 minutes for that at that speed. How far is he from Seminole? So this is just a giant like rectangle waiting to happen. Technically, I'll finish the drawing. You're looking for this side right here. So let's figure out how far he traveled west. Well, he traveled 24 miles per hour for 1.5 hours, so 36 miles west. And then he traveled 25 miles per hour for 2 hours, so 50 miles north. And then 40 minutes, 20 miles east. So so you have to use Pythagorean theorem based on this. This side, the bottom side right here is clearly the amount they've traveled west, so 36 minus 20. So 16, and the height is this amount they traveled north, so 50. So you do Pythagorean theorem, square root of 50 squared plus 16 squared gets you 52.5. Frequency of a vibrating string fixed on both ends varies directly as the square root of the tension and inversely with the length of the string. If the tension is 80 newtons and the length is 75 centimeters, the frequency is 512 hertz. What is the frequency if the tension is 96 and the length is 60? So if it's directly related, that means that what you have to do is you have to multiply some k value by your information to get you the frequency of 512 hertz. So since it's directly related to the square root of the tension, you multiply it by square root of 80. And since it's inversely related to the length of the string, you divide by the length of the string. So some k value times square root of 80 over 75 will get you 512 hertz. And you'll find that k is equal to 4,293. Then once you have that, you plug in your new data. Tension is now 96 and length is now 60. Plug it back in along with your new k, and you'll get 701 hertz. UIL Math Booster Club held a fundraiser to support the Salado math team. They flew to perform for the ceremony. Adult tickets cost $35. Student tickets cost $20. They sold 1,110 tickets, raised $34,020. How many adult tickets were sold? Well, the number of student tickets plus the number of adult tickets is equal to 1,110 tickets. And then the cost multiplied by how many student and adult tickets adds up to 34,020. So this is just a system of equation. Same method as problem 1. Put it into matrix and then go to math, scroll up, RF, matrix, put in your matrix, and you'll get 788 adult tickets sold. Grades for calculus class are based on 6 tests. 1 through 5 count once, and the grade on test 6 counts twice. This first test grades are 89, 93, 91, 84, and 85. Yeah, I did write that correctly. What is the lowest score you can make on test 6 and still have an average of 98.0 or higher? Well, your average score is going to be the sum of your scores over the number of tests. So you add them all together, 89 plus 93, yada, yada, yada. And then your final test counts twice, so you can imagine it as 2 tests. So 2 times some amount of score on your final test over your 5 tests you made plus 2 times your last test since it counts twice. So divide by 7 and you get a value of 94. 10. Austin is 218 miles from Argyle. 9 a.m. a van leaves Argyle heading towards Austin, traveling at 55 miles per hour. At 9:45, second van leaves Argyle, traveling at 75 miles per hour in the same direction. How far is the van from Austin when the second van catches the first van? So let's figure out how much of a head start the first van has. Well, they spent 45 minutes driving at 55 miles per hour, which means they're 41.25 miles ahead. So we need to figure out at what time their distances are equal. So 41.25 plus 55 times the number of hours has to be equal to 75 times the number of hours because that's the speed of the second van. Once those distances are the same, you'll be able to calculate how far they are. And then once you have that time, the distance they are from Austin is going to simply be the entire 218 minus the amount of distance they traveled. So 75 times the time the second van was traveling. And if you do that, you'll get a distance of 63 miles from Austin. Dennis's pool is rectangular in shape, length of 24, width of 18, depth of 4. 2 pipes fill it. Each pipe can fill the pool in 48 hours and can empty it in 60 hours. Or drain can empty it in 60 hours. First pipe is turned on at noon on Monday. 6 p.m. a second pipe is accidentally turned on, and 10 p.m. the drain is opened. First off, how many gallons does the pool contain when full? Okay, well, this is just figure out the volume of your rectangular pool. So 24, it's a rectangular prism, so 24 times 18 times 4, length times width times height. Then multiply it by 12 cubed to convert from cubic feet to cubic inches, and then divide by 231 to convert from cubic inches to gallons, and you get 12,926. And what is the earliest time on Wednesday the pool will be full? So let's figure out how much of a head start the pool, or how full the pool was before the drain turned on. So it each pipe goes at a rate of one pool over 48 hours, as you can hopefully understand. The first pipe works for 10 hours, the second one works for 4 hours. So that means by the time the drain turns on, 0.29166 pulls have been completed. So you have to figure out how long it takes the rest of the pull to fill. So subtract that by 1 pull. And then now everything is activated, so some amount of time will apply to all these rates and result in it being completely full. So the drain goes at a rate of one empties at a rate of 1 pull over 60 hours. So yeah, and if you do that, you solve for X, then you add it to 10 p.m. on Monday, you'll get a value of like 26.2 for X. And if you do the time conversion, you'll get 2:20 a.m. Consider the circle with points A, B, C on it. Point O is the center of the circle. AC intersects BD at point O. AB is 8, AC is 16, and point O is the center of the circle. Find the area of BOA. Well, the fact that O is the center of a circle gives some interesting information about their intersection. That means that both BD and AC are diameters of the circle. Also, they are given that AB is equal to 8. So I drew out the circle in a way it could be realistically made. Of course, if B was like here, it wouldn't really be reasonable to get there in 8, a length of 8. So now that you know the diameter is 16, because you're given AC is 16, you're given that BO is, you can find out that the radius is 8. So AO is 8, BO is 8, and it's given that AB is 8. So that's an equilateral triangle. So equation for equilateral triangle, side squared times square root of 3 over 4 gets you 27.7. Find the length of minor arc AD. Okay, well, since this angle is clearly 60 degrees because that's an equilateral triangle, these two angles must be supplementary, so this one is 180 minus 60, or 120 degrees. There are 360 degrees in a circle, so this makes up 120 over 360, or 1/3 of the entire circle circumference, arc AD. So if you do that, you get your circumference is going to be 16 times pi, divided by 3, and you get a 16.8. 15.0 is the center of the circle, DO is 12, and DB is 60. And BA is tangent to point at point A, and BC is tangent at point C. Find the area of DCB. Okay, we're going to be using a few things to figure this out. First off, if you remember that the chord based on outside angle thing, you'll remember on a few previous tests that the length of the thing outside times the length of the entire secant line, as it's called, is equal regardless of where it is. So the outside portion of BC times the entire portion of BC, which is the exact same thing. So as a result, the entire length of DB is 60, and the length of BE is, well, 60 minus 2 times the radius of 12. So 36. So 60 times 36 is equal to BC squared, and you get a length of 46.4758. Then once you have that, you can figure out this angle right here to help you figure out the area of your triangle. You know this is 12 because it's a radius, and you know this value, which is 46.4758, and you know that this is a right angle because it's tangent to the circle. So now you can do tangent -1 of your opposite over your adjacent to get this angle of 14.478%, or 14.478 degrees. So what is the area of their triangle? Well, an area of a triangle is equivalent to your two sides times sine of your angle over 2. So the entire 60 times the 46.4758 times sine of 14.478 divided by 2, because it's a triangle at the end of the day. And then if you do that, you'll get an area of 349. Find the area of the region inside AOB, but outside sector AOE. So you're looking for this entire thing right here, basically. So what you need to do is first off figure the area of this triangle, then subtract it with the area of this circle sector. So the area of the triangle isn't too hard to figure out. This is a right angle because it's tangent. So you can multiply 12 by your AB length of 46.4758 because A, B, and BC are basically the same thing. Then once you do that, you'll get the length of, and divide by 2, you'll get the length of your triangle, or the area of your triangle. Then you have to subtract it with the area of this circle. Well, you need to figure out what degree this sector is. Well, you know this angle right here is 14.478. This angle is 90 degrees. So everything that's left in the 180-degree triangle is right here. So 180 minus 90 minus 14.478 gets angle Y right here. And once you do that, you do the area of circle. So r squared times pi times your angle over the entire 360 degrees of the circle. And you'll get an area of 184 when you subtract that from the triangle area. Measure of angles in a triangle are in the ratio of 4, 5, 6. Find the measure of the smallest angle. Well, the angles of a triangle have to add up to 180. So 4 times sum ratio plus 5 times sum ratio plus 6 times sum ratio has to be equal to 180 degrees. You get an x value of 12, and to figure out the smallest angle, you simply put x back into this ratio with the smallest number. So 4 times 12 is 48. 18, consider a right circular cylinder with a volume of 2714. Diameter of the base is 12. What is the surface area of the cylinder? Well, volume of the cylinder is r squared times pi, the area of your base, times your height will get you 2714. Put that in EQ solver and you'll get a height of 24. Then once you have that, you need surface area. Well, surface area comprises the two circles at the top and bottom. So r squared times pi times 2, plus the lateral surface area, which is the circumference times the height. So 12 pi times 24. And if you add that together, you'll get a surface area of 1131. Consider a regular hexagon with an inscribed circle and circumscribed circle. An area of an inscribed circle is 763 degrees or centimeters. And what is the area of the circumscribed circle? Well, when something is circumscribed in a regular when a circle is circumscribed in a regular polygon, that means that it kind of looks like this in a way. Here, the circle kind of looks like that on a given side. So, as a result, to figure out the length of this side right here, we just need to do tangent of your angle, which is going to be here, times your radius of your circle. So since there's 6 sides, your angle is going to be 180 over 6. And then if you multiply that by your r, which you calculate by a normal circle formula, and multiply it by 2, because this is technically a double-sided side, like this, you'll get the area, or you'll get a side of the hexagon. Then now you need the area of your circumscribed circle. So a circumscribed circle is going to look like this is going to do this to the hexagon. So as a result, you need the length of this hypotenuse right here. So now that you have this side, you have the opposite. You need the hypotenuse, so you need cosecant, or sine of 180 over 6, power to negative 1. Multiply it by your opposite, so sine over 2, and that will get you your hypotenuse of capital R of 18. And then once you have that, plug it back into the equation, r squared times pi, and you get 1017. 7 is a 0 of this equation, then what is k? Well, if 7 makes this function equal 0, then just plug in 7 and figure out what k value makes it equal to 0. Just put it in EQ solver. Simple as that. Boat leaves port at 1 p.m. and travels at a bearing of 236 degrees at 24 knots. At 2 p.m., a second boat leaves and travels at 20 knots at a bearing of 24. How far are the boats at 6 p.m.? So let's figure out how far the boats traveled in terms of knots, suppose. So they traveled for 5 hours at 24 knots, so 24 times 5. And then the other boat traveled 4 hours at 20 knots, so 20 times 4. And then once you do that, you need to figure out the angle. Well, how bearings work is you figure out the distance between the two bearings, and that's your angle. So the angle would be 212, which means that you need to, because it's a triangle, you need to, you're given the larger area of your entire 360 degrees. So you need to subtract that from 360 degrees to get the smaller angle that actually forms the triangle. So 360 minus 212 will be your angle. Then once you do that, you'll get a side of 192.6 knots, multiplied by 1.15 to convert to miles. Technically, it's not really knots. Knots is a measurement of speed, but you get what I'm doing. Multiply by 1.15 and you get 221 miles. Joe places 110,000 in an account that earns 5.06 interest compounded quarterly, and that much money in an account that made 4.94 interest monthly, compounded monthly. At the end of 3 years, how much more money does he have in Brock than Weatherford? Well, if an account is compounded quarterly, that means you need to divide the rate by 4 and multiply the time by 4. So I forgot to fix that. The amount of money you originally put in times 1 plus the rate divided by 4, powered to 4 times the time, is the interest gives you the amount in the first account, and then you have to subtract that from the amount in the second account. Well, it's compounded monthly. Take 1 plus your rate, divide by 12 because there are 12 months in a year, and then multiply time by 12. And if you do that, you'll get a value of 377. Time on Grandpa's clock is exactly 6:09. Was the obtuse angle between the hour and minute hand. We have a clock program for this. Go to clock program, put in your hours, put in your minutes, and you'll get an angle of 130.5. And then how many minutes till the hour hand and minute hand align for the second time? Well, take the time the clock program gives you and add the constant 360 over 5.5, and that's how long it takes to repeat from any, or align again from any previous alignment. So if you add that, you get 89.18 minutes, and you can move on. 25, you're given some functions here. Find h inverse of f inverse of 1. So figure out when f of x is equal to 1. And that happens at x equals -6. And then you have h inverse of -6. So when is h of x equal to 6? Or -6, I mean. Plug that into EQ Solver as well, and you'll get a value of -2. 26. The elk population has been doubling every 6 years. 112 elk in 2004. And what year should the population reach 7168 elks if it doubles every 6 years? So 112 is your start, and then it's doubled every 6 years. So 2 power to some time over 6 will have, when you multiply by 112, will have to get you the 7168 because it increases exponentially. So 2 power to your time over 6. Hopefully you can understand if time was 6, it would indeed double like it should. So it would go 112 times 2 power to 1, and it'd be 224. So you figure out what time will get you 7168. You figure out that the time is 36, and then you add it to 2004, which represents your starting time, and you get 2040 as your year. So the first 10 terms of this expression is what? Well, if you look closely, you'll notice that each term is 3/4 of the previous term. So as a result, the first term is 24 times 3/4 power to 0. Second one is 24 times 3/4 power to 1. Third term is 24 times 3/4 power to 2, and so on and so forth. So that means it's a summation from 1 to 10 of your original 24 times 3/4 power to your term minus 1, so x minus 1, because power to 0, power to 1, power to 2, like I said. And if you do that, you'll get a summation of 90.6. All right, 28, a hungry hawk is perched on top of 78-foot tall pole, spots mouse on ground, angle of depression is 20 degrees, and mouse moves directly towards the pole at 100 feet per second. Calculate 80 seconds later, the mouse stops. What is the angle of depression now? Well, angle of depression basically means this angle right here, the angle down from the horizontal. So this is 20 degrees. We can form a right angle here and figure out that for this triangle we've created, this angle is going to be 70 degrees, 90 minus 20 degrees. Then once you have that, you can use a tangent to figure out how far the mouse starts. So tangent of 70 times 78 reveals that the mouse started 214.3 feet away from the bottom of the pole. Mouse then moves for 80 seconds, 1 feet per second, so they move 80 feet back. So then now you need the new angle that was formed. So mouse is now like here or something. You need this new angle. Well, your opposite changed, but your adjacent stay the same. The 214.3 minus 80 is your new opposite, and 78 is your still constant adjacent. That will get you this angle right here, and then the angle of depression, as we mentioned, is 90 minus that, and you get 30.1. 29, equation of an ellipse is x minus 3 squared over a squared plus y plus 2 squared over b squared equals 1. A plus b is equal to 20. A and b is integers. The area of the ellipse is 311. What's the eccentricity? The area of an ellipse is equal to the x radius, as I'll call it, times the y radius over, or times pi. So your radius for any given thing is going to be equivalent to this a and b value. That causes the x to cancel out in terms of distance when equal to 1. So imagine x is equal to 9, and x minus not 3, or 9 minus 3 is 6, so 36. So this a needs to be 6 to counteract that, to make this still equal to 1. So as a result, as you can imagine, the radius of your circle would be 6 in terms of x, or of your ellipse would be 6 in terms of x. So this a and b value represents the radius on each dimension. So as we mentioned before, that means that a times b is equal to 111 over pi, which is 99. Then once you have these two systems of equations, a plus b is equal to 20, a times b is equal to 99. It's very clear and easy to see that a is 9 and b is 11. You can swap a and b. It doesn't affect the equation. Because what you do now is you take the larger radius, subtract it by the smaller radius, or use Pythagorean theorem of the larger radius squared minus the smaller radius squared. And then you divide it by the larger radius, and that's the definition of eccentricity of an ellipse. So do that, and you get a value of 0.575. The graph of x squared minus 6xy plus 25y squared plus 4x minus 12 is what? Well, we have this xy term, and as you can see, since this x squared and y squared are both positive, it starts out as an ellipse. So I explained it a bit more in my district test, or maybe it was invitational B, but you kind of bring it down to figure out what could possibly get you the xy that's shown. So as a result, you just take a square root of each of the coefficients for x and y, plug them in, and then square it so that it creates x squared and 25y squared, as mentioned before. This equation right here, as we talked about, creates negative 10y, which is a greater difference than this negative 6y. Therefore, it is still an ellipse. If this was a bigger difference, like if this was 60 minus 60xy, it would become a hyperbola. 31. Assume the life expectancy for men living in America falls is 37.5 and women is 83.6. If the total average is 80.9, what is total number of women divided by total number of men? Well, we can do it in terms of proportion. Sorry, that needs to be a plus sign. So 77.5 times the proportion of men plus 83.6 times the proportion of people who aren't men. Well, men and women have to add up to a total of 100%. So your woman is going to be 1 minus the proportion of men. So if you do that, that has to be equal to an average of 80.9. And if you solve for x, you'll get the proportion of men living in American Falls, and then number of women divided by number of men. Well, the proportion of women is 1 over x, 1 minus x, and the proportion of men is just x. Do that, and you get a value of 1.26. Consider the function shown here, which of the following are true. The range of the function is negative infinity to union 10 infinity. This is true because of how cosecant works. It goes from 1 to infinity and negative 1 to infinity, negative infinity. And this minus 4 means that its amplitude is multiplied by 4. Therefore, it goes from 6 being the center and having 5 and 7 be your bounds, from 6 being your center to having 2 and 10 as your bounds. So, number 1 is correct. And then number 2, the domain of f of x is all x is not equal pi over 4 plus n pi over 2. There are multiple ways you can figure this out. You can put this equation to y1, which you should have done already, hopefully, and analyze it, plug in some points like that, and you'll see that's true. Alternatively, you could calculate the period, which for cosecant, the period is 2 pi. It's multiplied by 2, which means you have to divide the period by 2, because it repeats itself that much more frequently. And then x cannot, or y cannot be both negative and positive infinity. So that's two scenarios that can't happen. So divide by 2 again. And then it can't happen. And cosecant of 0 is infinity. So that's your starting point, pi over 4. That value is true. The period of the graph, as we discussed, is definitely not 2 pi. It gets multiplied by 2, so it goes down to pi. The graph is symmetric round about the y-axis. If you graph the equation, you'll see that that's true. You also don't need to solve it because knowing 1 and 2 is true and 3 is false will give you the only answer that does that. And then 33, temperature varies sinusoidally, low 15, high of 27. Temperature is above 18 for how many hours? Well, this is going to be our sinu program. You know our y value, or the temperature you're looking for. You know your lower value of 15, your higher value of 27 degrees, and your period, well, it goes from low to high in 12 hours, so your period is 2 times that, so 24 hours. And then you're looking for when it's above or equal to 18. Our program right now, at least the one I have, only successfully solves this question if it's in degrees. Yeah, so as a result, you will need to have your program be in degrees for this question, and you will get 16.0. 34, consider the graph of the ellipse represented by these parametric equations. Distance between the focus is what? You can graph this like before and actually calculate it, but I'll give you a hint. It's given that it's an ellipse. This is going to represent the x radius. This is going to represent the y radius. So since it's an ellipse, the focus is distance from center of the focus is going to be your larger axis squared minus your smaller axis squared. And then once you do that, since you're looking for the distance between them, the focus are on either side of the center. So you have to multiply by 2 to get to the one before the center and after the center. And then, okay, 35. Graph of the polar equation r is equal to 6 minus 6 sine of theta is a, graphic. Go to polar, press mode, scroll down, polar equation, and then put it in, and then look at the actual graph. Make sure you're in radians mode so it actually graphs it correctly. There's nothing special really going on, but it's clearly not a circle. So as a result, that means it's a cardioid. Just think, if it's boring, it's a cardioid. 36, consider these two vectors. If the angles between the vectors are 44.735 degrees, then what is n? Okay, well, we need the angle between vectors is the dot product between the vectors and over the Pythagorean of all the coefficients of the vector. So in other words, dot product 4 times -2, unknown n times n plus 1, and then -3 times -5. Then you divide it by the Pythagorean of all the stuff. So 4 squared plus x squared plus 3 squared. And you also divide it for the other angle or vector. So 2 squared, x plus 1 squared, 5 squared. And then if you take the cosine inverse of that, it has to get you 44.735 degrees. And then n value of 6. And then Montana Institute of Technology admitted 240 freshmen. 86 took E&M, 90 took DE, 108 took Cal 3, 18 took E&M and DE. Okay, I'm not going to read all that, but I'll explain what you need to do. We need to figure out we need to be able to figure out that what we're looking for right now is the proportion of people who take E&M and Calc 3, because that's the only double group that's not mentioned. They tell you how many people took E&M and DE, DE and Calc 3, but they don't tell you EM and Calc 3. So what we need to do is we need to remove double and triple counts so that this 240 freshmen actually makes sense for the amount that took each class. Because if one person took 2 classes, that's going to count twice in this data set. So we need to subtract 1 to counteract that. Same with if someone took 3. Someone took all 3 classes, they would count on this data 3 times, so you need to subtract 2 to make them only count once. So add up all the data they give you, 86, 90, 108, taking all the classes. Here's one double count, subtract 18. Here's another double count, subtract 16. And we also need to subtract the double count of our unknown number of people that took Cal 3 and E&M. And here's 12 with the triple count, so subtract 2 times that value. And that will get you the number of people that took any of those courses. So 240 minus 34, because 34 didn't take any. That will get you 20 people that took, or if I wrote this correctly, that should give you 20 people that took E&M and Cal 3. Then you need to figure out how many people are only taking that class. Well, we know that there are the 86 people that took it. And then you don't want to include anyone that, why am I being weird? What the? Yeah, you have 86 people who took E&M. You have 12 people who took E&M and the or 12 you have 12 people that took all 3, so that accounts for 12 of your 86 in that class. You have 18 people that took E&M and D, so that counts at 18 of your E&M students. And you have your people who took Cal 3 and E&M, which also accounts for part of that data set. Everything that's left are people who must have only taken E&M, which is 36. 38. Carter invented a new card with 64 cards, 15 cards of each color, 4 wild cards. Each player is dealt 6-card hand. What's the probability that a hand will contain 2 wild cards? Well, we need to figure out the number of ways there can be 2 wild cards and 4 non-wild cards in your deck. So you can be selected there are 4 combination 2 ways you can get 2 wild cards selected because you don't really care about order in cards. And there are 60 combination 4 ways that 4 non-wild cards of the 60 can be selected. And then you have to divide by the number of ways total a hand can be given. So 64 combination 6. And you get a probability of 0.039. Consider the parabola on the right and the function x minus 3 was the equation of the directrix. But since this is a rotated parabola, we'll make things easier by flipping all the x and y values. So you'll want to use quadratic regression, putting your y's in L1 and your x's in L2s. You'll get that the focus distance, or you'll find that the A coefficient has a value of 0.5, so you can figure out your focus. Multiply it by 4, take the inverse of it, and you get a focus distance of 0.5. The directrix is the point of symmetry minus the focus distance. So 4 minus 0.5 is equal to 3.5. Then the point A11 lies on the graph of the parabola. What is A? Well, as we said, we flip the x's into y, so figure out y1 of 11, and you'll get a value of 36. 41, the area bounded by the graph of the parabola and y is equal to f of x is what? Well, this y and x still needs to be flipped. X is equal to y plus 3 or minus 3. So that means that y is equal to x plus 3. Put that into y2, and you can use our auxiliary program now. It'll find the intersections just fine. And then your line of revolution is not relevant for this question. And we can move on. 42, the line tangent to y equals h of x has a slope of negative 1.6 when x is what? You'll want to use stat edit and then quadratic regression to figure out your equation for h of x. And then once you do that, you'll just need to figure out at what x value the derivative of h of x is equal to negative 1.6. You can just put that in EQ solver, d over dx of y1, or whatever you put it in, is equal to negative 1.6. And that happens at x equals 4.4. Now you'll need to do the same thing for the second graph. Solid revolution gets you 961.39. If b is less than 0, then what is b? We have a program for this as well. The auxiliary reverse volume with y. So what you do there is you're looking for the line of revolution. So you put in your volume, you put in your intersections of the two graphs, which you need to find with EQ solver. You'll find it at these two x values. And then you can make a guess for your line. I put negative 5 because it's kind of in the middle. And you'll get a value of b equals negative 4. 44, Rob is designing a jogging track. It is a semicircle with is it a rectangle with a semicircle on each end? Perimeter of the track will be 600 meters. Rob wants to maximize the rectangular angle. What is the maximum value? So I guess I'll draw it out. I probably should have done that ahead of time. But imagine this as the track. So we'll assign x as the value or as the part not or as the perimeter of the part that goes the width basically. So it will be the combination of these two sides right here. So x over 2 will get you one side of your rectangle, and then you need to figure out the other side of your rectangle. Well, everything that's not being spent on these two sides is being spent on the semicircle perimeters. So what you do is 600 minus x is the amount being spent on that, because the entire perimeter is 600. And then you're converting the entire circle length down to the diameter, so you divide by pi to get the height of your thing. And then once you do that, you need to figure out when the area is maximum, which happens when the derivative of the area is equal to 0, which happens at x equals 300 meters. Then you plug in 300 back to your equation, and you get a value of 14,324 meters squared. What f of x is equal to 3 over 8 x cubed plus 2x minus 1. Find a value of f negative 1 prime of 6. The value, or the derivative of an inverse function is equal to 1 over f prime of the inverse of your value. So when is this function equal to 6? Well, you find that. I believe it was at x equals 2. And then once you do that, you just do 1 over f prime of 2, and you will get a value of 0.154. Not too bad. 46 to 47, in April, researchers from Texas A&M found that Lake Marvin trout population was 0. They believe it can support no more than 5,000. 1,000 trout was released, and the rate of increase is based on this. So we're given the equation for a logistic, so diff-EQ program, go to logistic. You'll be using your m in time, because you're looking for the time of this 25 weeks to solve problem 47. And I don't know really the difference between 1 and m, but in this case, I think it's because that you know this. Oh, it's because you know the max. You know the max is 500, probably. So put in your initial of 1,000. Your coefficient is going to be that number way out front here, so 0.0003. Then your max is the 5,000 trout it can support, and your final time is the 25 weeks for modeling. And that'll get you the time of the fastest rate and the amount of trout at that point, so C and D respectively. 48, this is a Riemann's, or we're approximating the area under a curve using trapezoids. So you'll want to put this stuff into stat edit and then use our approximation program. You have a table, so Riemann's table, and it's a trapezoid equation. So trapezoid and then a length of 4 intervals. And then once you have that, uh, you just plug it in the program. You have 4 trapezoids being formed, and you get a value of 130.5. 49. Consider the region M in the first quadrant bounded by these two equations and the y-axis. Vertical line x equals c divides M into two regions of equal area. C is equal to what? If you plug those two equations into y1 and y2, you'll see that the area bounded between the y-axis and their intersections happens at x equals 0 and x equals 4.2656. In other words, you need to figure out when is the integral from 0 to x of y1 minus y2 equal to the integral from the rest of the integral. So the integral from x to the intersection, 4.2656. When are they equal to each other? So that's basically what they're saying. When are the area equal? And that happens at an x value of 1.34 if you put that in EQ solver. 50 to 51, consider this graph. Find the area of one leaf of the rose petal. Area of a polar equation is the integral from your two bounds. The bounds of a leaf is going to be pi over this number right here. So integral from 0 to pi over 3 of r squared over 2. I can't prove why that is a thing, but that's just how it works. So this equation squared divided by 2, and you get an area of 4.2. Find a perimeter of one leaf. Like we said, the leaf happens from 0 to pi over 3. And now what you're looking for is the arc length. So arc length of a polar equation is integral from your bounds to square root of r squared plus the derivative squared. You take the derivative first before squaring it, and if you do that, you'll get a value of 8.9 as your perimeter. 52, consider this curve. Find the equation of the line tangent to the curve at the point 2c. C is greater than 1. The y-intercept of the tangent line is the point 0b. What is b? So what you're going to do is we have another program for this. 5y squared minus 4xy plus 2x cubed minus 3y minus 14. Put that into y1. And then go to diff EQ again. Then you can do slope from equation. And you can do we're looking for the tangent slope. So the line tangent to the curve. You know your x of 2. You know that y is greater than 1, so you can put a y guess of like 5 or something. And you will get a y-intercept of 5.5 repeating, or 5.6. Suppose 25% of students at Latexo plan to attend Harvard. 40% plan to major in mathematics. Of 75% who do not plan to attend Harvard, 20% plan to major in mathematics. Given that a randomly selected student plans to major in math, what's the probability that the student attends Harvard? Probability of event A given B is equal to the probability of event A over the probability of event B. So, as a result, the probability that someone is planning to go to Harvard and major in math is 0.25 times 0.4. And the probability that they're planning on majoring in math is going to be the 0.25 times 0.4% of people going to Harvard who are majoring in it, plus the 0.75 times 0.2% of people who are not going to Harvard but still majoring in math. Then once you divide that, you get a value of 0.4. 54, according to the Idaho Insurance Agency, state accident rate for 18-year-old males was 0.125 accidents for every driver during 2020. Random sample of 120 of 18-year-old males and boys found that 18 of them had been in an accident in 2020. The accident rate for males and boys is the same as statewide. What's the probability of getting a sample whose accident rate is 0.15 or greater? As it turns out, 18 over 120 is indeed 0.15, which means we can use a one prop test, one prop z test. So go to stat test, one prop z test, and then you know your actual proportion of 0.125. Your x is 18. 18 of them had been involved in accidents, and 120 were in the sample. Find out the probability of that sample happening by chance, which is what the p-value represents, and you get a value of 0.20. That's what the p-value basically says. It's saying what's the probability that a sample of this magnitude would happen just by chance. So that's the probability we're looking for. 55 through 57, you're given some data, and they analyze the data by performing a least squares regression model. So put this into X, put the X's into L1, Y's into L2, and find the residual of week 4. So Y of 4 minus 25. Absolute value of that. And once you do linear regression and store it into Y1, and you will get a value of 1.78. Based on the LSRL, how many push-ups does Mr. Kanto expect to do at the end of his workout on week 9? Well, this is just a prediction at x equals 9, so y of 9 is 4d2. Calculate the standard deviation of the residuals. Find the approximate size and typical prediction area. So what you'll want to do for this is more complicated. You'll need to put the residuals of each thing into y1. I told you how to calculate it earlier, like this. Then, once you do that, you need to do one variable stats and find the standard deviation and turn as the O of X kind of thing. I don't remember what that symbol's called. Then once you have that, that's what happens when you divide it by the entire data set of 6. However, because both the X and Y are varying based on a least squares regression model, kinda, that's the easiest way for me to put it. You have to subtract 4 from what you're dividing by instead. So normally your standard deviation is calculated by doing a bunch of stuff with this and then dividing by 6. Now we need it to divide by 4, and then you square root that. So now we need to counteract that, so square it again, multiply it by 6 over and divide by 4 to change it from being divided by 6 to being divided by 4, and then take the square root of that back, and you will get a value of 1.05. The mean score on the first exam of Professor Stott's class was 82. Scores on the first exam were approximately normal. Justin's score of 89 places him in 90th percentile. What's the standard deviation of the scores on the first exam? Well, we need to figure out how many standard deviations the 90th percentile is away. So inverse norm of 0.9, your standard deviation or your mean is going to be 0 and your standard deviation is 1. Because we're looking for how many standard deviations away. You'll get a value of about 1.24 standard deviations. So the distance between Justin's score and the mean is 7. So 7 divided by the number of standard deviations away will get you the value of a standard deviation, which is 5.46. Okay, we're almost done. You're given a bunch of data. They give you numbers of peoples. They give you mean, standard deviation. This is basically screaming a 2-sample t-test. So that's what we're going to do. A 2-sample t-test. So go to your stat, test, 2-sample t-test. You have a bunch of stuff for your stats. So your x1 is going to be your mean. And your SX is going to be your standard deviation, and then your N is going to be, well, your N. Put that in for both data sets, and look for when the probability of U is greater than U2. This doesn't really make sense. U1 is greater than U2, I believe. Yeah. So once you do that, you plug in all the data from this stuff here, you'll get a p-value of 0.006. It is known that 28% of seniors at Pokey High enroll in ISU after graduating from high school. 18 seniors are randomly selected. There's a probability at least 6 of them will enroll in Idaho State. Well, that we need to figure out the probability that at least 6 of them enroll. That's 1 minus the probability that 5 or less enroll, because the entire probability has to add up to 1. So we can use binomial CDF for that. Go to distribute binomial CDF. And then once you do that, you have 18 seniors being selected. Your probability is 0.28, and your X value you're looking for is 5 or less, so 5. Subtract that from 1, and you get a value of 0.69 or 0.39 as your probability. Okay, that was a pretty long test. I didn't go quite into as much detail as I did on the previous 3 tests because the problems are more complicated, so I can't. So I want to get to the new stuff, I suppose. If you want any more detail on how to solve some of the simpler stuff, you can potentially watch those videos. A lot of the problems are there as well as just leaving me a comment or asking me a question in person, and I'll try to answer them. See you on the state test, which is probably the hardest test UIL has made in at least 4 years.